Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining. It's really great to have you all here. We are delighted that we have such a high interest in a week where there's Green Week in Brussels and many other biodiversity meetings happening around Europe. So we are happy to discuss with you these ideas on how to actually tackle the challenges that Mr. Milukas very nicely raised here. But first of all, let me thank BiodiversityKnowledge again for hosting us here, because it's always much easier and very good to have a place in Brussels to have such meetings, and it's wonderful that BiodiversityKnowledge gives us the opportunity to have the project meeting here. So when we are thinking about this issue of when we were starting the project of the network of knowledge, of course it's a dimension behind it which has been developing over many years, and this is what I want to give you some ideas on. So first of all, when we are thinking about knowledge, of course there's a wealth out there. This is a picture from the CBD COP10 in Nagoya some two years ago, where you have these loads and tons of material of knowledge, if you like, in brochures and so on. So the question is how actually we can use this. And the question, of course, is how, when we basically as scientists, how we actually are approaching this challenge. And I thought, well, maybe we put it in a little bit different context when starting here for the conference and introducing it. First of all, of course, biodiversity and ecosystem service is a thing of huge complexity. We all know this. Accordingly, the community behind it, working on it, is complex. We have curiosity as scientists and networkers and how actually to tackle it. We have, of course, concern, and of course, basically the concern comes from policy. We have some strategies to tackle and so on. And then in the end, there is a demand for this better interfacing that we have been heard about already today. So first of all, about the complexity, you all know this, so I will go through this probably quite rapidly. We know this very well-known framework from the Millennium Assessment, where we see that the linkage between direct, indirect drivers, ecosystem services, and human well-being is already quite complex, but it gets even more complex because they tackle biodiversity only down here in the corner, which of course itself is highly complex. And also the interlinkages, the arrows here, are also something quite complex. And this is, for example, what the TEEP study then later on developed. They used the framework from the NA. You see this here in the orange boxes again. And then they were thinking about how to actually address this in terms of governments and decision making, and of course even more looking at the different dimensions of benefits and values. So also the social science components come into that as well. So this is really the first dimension of the complexity. Then the way we are dealing with it, the way we are trying to help with it in the science policy context is even more complex. This is one of the, one first try that we try to develop, get an overview what this landscape of institutions actually is that is tackling biodiversity. You see here many players, and it's not at all the important players in Europe and international. And then we had done a priority setting within our team, and you see that, of course, some bubbles appear to be more important when it comes to knowledge transfer. It's like the CBD, like IUCN, like the Millennium Assessment. But of course, from different perspectives, you still can discuss about this, and we will do this also across the next days. Then when we try to understand, it gets even more, complex, and this is something I won't explain in detail. We have it over here also on the wall, so you can have a look later on. Just to remind you that we have a huge, when it just comes to research here on the blue left side, we have a huge number of institutions. We have our EU-funded projects. We have our EU infrastructures, which are now developing, like the LifeWatch initiative. We have on the international side, Diversitas. We have global infrastructures like GeoBond developing and many others. And of course, all this at the core are the universities and so on who are dealing with that. And on the other hand, of course, we have the policy side, where you have all the national policies going on, which is not detailed here. On the European level, we have, for example, the strategy development of the EU biodiversity strategy. We have, of course, the work of other DGs, which are also tackling biodiversity topics, and how to link this then with the global level in the corner. to CBD, to other multilateral agreements, but also to the work of UNEP, for example, is a challenge. And this is how we see at the moment how this interface area looks like, and it's in fact, of course, quite diverse and developing. Especially if we imagine that now we have on the global level the IPBES coming up. It's not that it has been founded last month, as we said, but it's not that established. Like, for example, the Millennium Assessment, like IUCN working on the interface between science and policy very much, and many others. And on the European level now we are in a situation, as we had described it already, that we are thinking about the big question mark in the middle about how to have a European mechanism on biodiversity expertise, which of course could then link to the national level, could link to the IPBES. And we have also a contract from DG Environment, which is now discussing from the policy context on how such a EU mechanism could serve all the needs from the policy side. And on the other side, we are here with our project thinking about how we can network the scientific side to support this interface in the future. And this is why we think that the project is really helping at the right time to think about how to further develop this interface. So coming to the second point about curiosity, this is something you will be very well aware of. But also when it comes to such projects like ours, where we think about, oh, we need more networking, and all of us has been doing this for at least 15 years. And we know we should look back a little bit that we have been very successful over the last, 15, 20 years. In terms that biodiversity research has developed to a field where integration is going further and further continuously, where we are making integrated projects, where we had, for example, the networks of excellence, sorry, not of knowledge, that's wrong here, like EDIT, Alternet, and MARBEF, funded by the Commission. We have data networks which are developing, like GBIF, like EBON, and many others. We have more than 50 biodiversity research projects over the last couple of years. We have also integration steps in terms of ecosystem services research, which is developing since, 5 to 10 years. We have, for example, the Ecosystem Services Partnership, which is a linkage between many scientists in the areas. We have new and emerging and upcoming FP7 projects on the issue. And also we have infrastructures coming up or developing like LifeWatch, or in the future like XPeer. And not to forget, we also have an integration across the funding, which is basically done by the ERAN at Biodiversa. So there's quite a lot of integration which has been going on. And we are already thinking, and they still need to do a lot, but we are already thinking the next step ahead. And this, of course, is very challenging, and we are very aware of that. So on the other hand, we, of course, have all these products that we have been describing. We have thousands of research papers. I remember that I think even only the alarm project had some 500 spin-off papers with all the 50 partners involved during 5 years. So this is a wealth of knowledge. We have databases. We are producing science or policy briefs from projects, from others. We, of course, have meetings. We have science policy meetings all over the place with the projects. But still, we have a lot of things to do. And also, we have very good processes at hand to identify research needs, and which will be even more important also in the future when it comes to Horizon 2020, when it comes to identifying needs also from the IPBES perspective. We have been doing this on the European side with the EPBRS, and of course Diversitas on the international level is also doing a very good job here. So on the other hand also, again looking forward, we have even more new additional challenges, because the biodiversity mainstreaming also gives a large thing or a last task to do for biodiversity research. We see from the perspective of the T project, businesses ask more and more for ways to better accounting for biodiversity in their work. We have seen this in TEEP, we have business and biodiversity initiatives. There's a lot of work to do. And of course we have to link to all the other grand challenges like health, like food security, like energy security. That really biodiversity is taken into account there. We know all these discussions about the RED scheme and climate, in the climate negotiations, for example, the problem about biofuels and how biodiversity wasn't taken into account in the beginning of all these discussions in Europe, and many other things. So there's still a lot of things to do, but on the other hand, we really have to tackle this concern, the concern about making better policy and management. I guess most of you will know the Aichi targets. They have been from the CBD. They are highly ambitious in terms of mainstreaming components. They have lots of things which go well beyond the usual nature conservation issues. So they're highly ambitious. And also we have ambitious targets in the EU biodiversity strategy. We have quite diverse targets there, to be honest. We have inter alia big challenges there with regards to ecosystem services and developing green infrastructures. The problem here a little bit is that we have a very uneven level of preparation, for example, in the member states when it comes to the concept of ecosystem services. We have very diverse governance approaches across the countries and how to, well, account for ecosystem services in their administrative systems. And of course also we have diverse and multiple knowledge holders on that field. There's really a need for an integrative and flexible governance approach between the Commission, between the member states and the knowledge holders. And there's of course again the point where science and other knowledge holders come in to play their role in such processes, also when it comes to strategic policy development. So another challenging thing also we have to remember is that, of course, when it comes to timelines, and timelines in policy are always shorter than in research. You will know that for sure. For example, just to show you here, when thinking about the implementation of the EU strategy, they say that by 2014, the EU and the member states will have been done some ecosystem services assessments. Now we have the Aichi targets implementation until 2020, and we have the question of how IPBES will serve all this with thematic assessments, with regional assessments, and later on with the global assessment. We don't know yet how this will be structured. We don't have a work program now for IPBES. And then, of course, there is the question how this is interlinked. This is already quite challenging. That, for example, our European work on assessments could really feed into the global assessments on from IPBES. But even more challenging is this challenge of linking research activities to it from Horizon 2020, which is just here as an example, but also, of course, from other areas. So this is also a challenge that we have to keep in mind, that these timelines, when it also comes to science policy work, is always a challenge, because scientists tend to always want a little bit more time than they might have actually. So the last point about the solution via the demand. Of course, we had said that we always have to ask ourselves as knowledge holders: are we producing the right products? Do we have the right measures? Is reports enough? Or, of course, do we need other products? Do we need other ways to communicate that? And then it comes a little bit to stepping backwards, which also goes back to the previous talk, thinking about how is actually science policy work organized. And this is a typology that we had developed for science policy interface organizations, SPIs, within the Spiral project, which is researching these biodiversity interfaces. And you see that, of course, they can be very, very different. They can be coming from learned societies, from other interest groups like NGOs. They can be coming basically out of research projects. Every research project on the EU level today has to have a dissemination work package where this interface is ensured. Then, of course, you have formal political processes like working groups from the Commission, like advisory bodies and others. And of course you have, on the other hand, still the state agencies and institutes who are, of course, have also their role in serving this, for example, on the European level, the European Environmental Agency. So in this field there's also some sort of complexity, but nevertheless we know quite a lot today. And in the development of IPBES, which tackles the global dimension of the problem, it shows that all these different elements somehow needs to be balanced. That it's not only about writing big assessments, that it's really giving policy support without being policy prescriptive, thinking about new ways of producing products, thinking about this dialogue between knowledge holders and knowledge knowledge requesters in a much more detailed sense than, for example, it is done in IPCC. So this is why this idea of a network of knowledge somehow developed over the last couple of years, saying that an IPBES, because of the nature of the topic of biodiversity, also needs regional networks, might need thematic networks to tackle specific things. And then, of course, when it comes to Europe, we have to think about how a European network of knowledge could, in fact, support, on the one hand, the European policy needs, and on the other hand, also IPBES needs. So the new balance in our landscape in Europe when it comes to science, take this triangle here as the science and knowledge triangle. We of course have on the one hand the knowledge synthesis, which needs to be done, which is done, for example, via BISE, via the Biodiversity Information System, probably via the idea we are developing here with Biodiversity Knowledge, also with assessments with others. We have the research strategy development in Europe, basically done by EPBRS. We have also the joint research agenda and activities coming from Biodiversity, from joint program initiatives and Horizon 2020. But then we really have to make this link to decision making and policy, and this is the challenge that we face. And so the question you might pose yourself now, not coming from the project, is exactly what is this thing we call biodiversity knowledge supposed to do? And I will just not go into details here, but just to show you what we want to discuss you over the next couple of days. We defined a network of knowledge within the workshop already some years ago to bring together existing organizations and processes as a network of networks, improve the science policy interface by helping the focus the support of science and scientists on the needs of those setting policies. And so this is what actually the trigger was for the call for this project, and we were happy to be successful with our proposal for that. So it's really something which to somehow duplicates the IPBES main mission on the global level, on the European level. But of course, it will be different because Europe is different. This is our work package stream, and I just wanted to show you where we are. We have started with some mapping and overview of expertise. We are now have been developing the network of knowledge prototype. Then we want to test it. Some of you have been will already be involved in that for some of the test cases on Wednesday and Thursday, and then further developing the framework in the future. And three things we want to discuss with you here. The first of all is how to provide such a platform for exchange and mutual learning. Because it's not all about just, well, making very specific things, but really thinking about how we can arrange ourselves, engage ourselves in becoming a community of interest, which is not only knowledge holders from different sides, but also the knowledge requesters that are asking for that. We can link it directly with platforms that are existing, like the BISE system, like the IONER system. We will come to that tomorrow. So this is basically about this idea of bringing together this challenge of complexity that I described in the beginning and the issue of curiosity together. Just to remind you, this is basically linking up with other initiatives and institutions. It's on the applied side with the European Environmental Agency. It's on the research side with all the projects which are there, and many of them are in the room here, I hope. And also the international side that with the organizations we mentioned already. So this is to be discussed basically throughout the conference. We want to have your ideas from your networks. This is why we ask you to put as many networks and projects on your badge as you are working on, to see that really this networking is something which goes beyond just being representative for one organization. So this was what we want to discuss. The second point is to provide a process for request-driven advice. This is something more concrete where we really are developing this prototype. You might have looked at it in the material that we sent to you before. I will not go into detail on that. Barbara, who basically developed that, will present it tomorrow, and this will be discussed tomorrow in the breakout group, and how actually we can serve such a process. And then the third and last thing is to develop an open and coherent governance structure for such a thing. We know that from a policy side, but also from the science side, it's always difficult to involve a variety of thematic and national knowledge hubs to ensure proper acknowledgement for all of this and to making the link to decision making. So this is about thinking about what are the roles, what can the roles be for people coming from the community. There can be, well, in scoping processes, there can be reviewers, of course there can be in working groups, a little bit like IPBES is foreseeing this for their work. And on the other hand, we have the knowledge users, and we have to think about the structure, how to actually do that. And also this is introduced tomorrow, and this is the second thing we want to discuss. But of course, and this is something that we have been discussing already in several regional workshops, we have major challenges behind that, and you all will be aware from your work on this. This is about wide participation, how to really ensure that a large number of diverse knowledge holders are at least informed about this process and can participate if they want to. But they have, of course, different capacities to join this, and how to acknowledge that and how to take this into account. We have to have an open access collaboration for such things. We have to be transparent. We have to avoid duplication. This is actually something which is very often raised from practitioners who have been discussing with this on the regional workshops. They said it would be very interesting just for me to know if this problem I have in southern Sweden is something which has been solved in Central Europe already, but I simply don't know. And all they can do at the moment is Google. And this is certainly not the solution for such problems that we have. Of course, when it comes to scientific reviewing work, meta-analysis work, it's all about ensuring quality, it's about minimizing bias. Of course, as we have heard today, things related, for example, to conservation are never completely, well, neutral or something like that, even if they're coming from conservation biology. But nevertheless, we have to think about this. And of course, striving for relevance, making a good linkage and buy-in by policy, for example, via a future EU mechanism. So, to finalize, what we want to do at the conference are four major things. First of all, take a look and reflect at the European knowledge and interface landscape. We have been doing some work on that, but we still want to involve now this group, which again is another group, which will be basically done today by our knowledge cafe approach, which we will explain later. We will discuss basically the solutions for shaping a network of knowledge. I stress the solutions here because, of course, we all know the challenges behind it and the problems. We want to learn from you as well for the technical and administrative perspective, but also from the thematic and practical perspective, and how you think that such processes could work. And then the third one, this is the more discussion part on Wednesday for those of you who want to learn more about IPBES. And we want to discuss on Wednesday morning then the context of the international context of IPBES and the European dimension to it. And last not least, of course, this is not over here. We really want to start a broader process of the project now with this meeting. And we want to identify next step and ways of staying engaged with you and see how actually we can ensure that we have a future information exchange, that you might be interested to get involved in our demonstration cases and other things. And we are really looking forward with you. And one point I forgot here, of course, a fourth very important point we want to achieve as a conference is that we have a very nice dinner together with you tomorrow afternoon in the Natural History Museum, where you're all invited, but we will get more news on that soon and how we actually find our way there tomorrow afternoon. So that's all for now. Thank you again for joining us with your curiosity and your concern, and to help us find new ways of interfacing the knowledge on biodiversity in the future. Thank you very much.